Well, I guess I better give the people what they deserve. In the long line of Call of Duty games, there's been a few titles with the number 3 in them. One of them, Black Ops 3, was widely considered one of the better experiences, partly because Zombies Chronicles saved its butt, but that leaves us with a few others. My personal favorite Modern Warfare title, and widely considered quote-unquote good Modern Warfare 3 from 2011, and the, well, other Modern Warfare 3, of course.
Take this to hell with you, Captain. Never bury your enemies alive.
Obviously, if you read the title, there's one more installment that, honestly, if most people didn't know how to count to 3, they probably would have forgotten it even existed in the first place. I covered the multiplayer a little bit ago, so here we go, guys. This is Call of Duty 3, The Campaign. Before I really tear into this, like I said in the multiplayer video, this was my very first Call of Duty game as a kid, and probably my very first first-person shooter as well. So I think it's important to note that this game literally had about 8 months of real development time behind it due to the time constraints Activision gave Treyarch to push out a new title at the time. As history would show, Activision has always been notorious for sucking its development partners dry. The iron was hot after Call of Duty 2, and the pressure was on Treyarch for the next big Call of Duty release. I loved this game as a kid, and it was the main reason I even became interested in history in general, but as I grew older, I found people really hated this game. But I feel the development time and cutthroat business tactics of Activision honestly attributes to its pitfalls that it had at the time, and is sort of why it was one of the World War II video game killers of that era, despite World at War being such a smash hit 2 years later. To me, Call of Duty 3 was one of the more unique World War II shooters of the era, and honestly was overshadowed and unsung because of its successor. Call of Duty 3 feels very much like a blueprint for what World at War became, and I believe, if given more time, it could have been a pretty groundbreaking title in the franchise, even more so than Call of Duty 4. You can feel the semblance of passion in the game, something I think Call of Duty lost a long time ago. I swear, this is the only Call of Duty that had a 30-minute documentary in the special edition version that I know of. And it actually had accounts from some World War II veterans and the old Treyarch devs. This was a special edition that was actually worth it, and a game that actually cared about the topic it was covering. If you want to see some of the documentary that's being showed in the background right now, I copied the link in the description. Now, let's tear into the black sheep of the Call of Duty family. The campaign showcases the French theater of the war directly after the beachheads were established on D-Day, and follows 5 different countries from the Allied forces: the United States 29th Infantry Division, the British Special Air Force alongside French resistance fighters, the 4th Canadian Armored Division, and the Polish 1st Armored Division, with the campaign bouncing between each story frequently. The first mission, St. Lo, and subsequently all the others, follow one objective pretty much: push inland towards Paris, while forcing the German Wehrmacht into Falaise, creating what is known in history as the Falaise Gap, or Falaise Pocket. Something interesting I'd like to point out here in the opening is that Call of Duty 3's campaign was one of the first entries where they tried getting rid of loading screens by using cutscenes as the loading screens, so it feels a little more seamless during transitions. The campaign begins like almost any other Call of Duty campaign from this era. You walk over to good old Private Huxley and pick up your M1 Garand rifle and do a little target practice, which leads into some grenade tossing and maybe a little bit of barn defilement. Nothing too special that you haven't seen here yet, except for maybe the fact that some objects do have collision now, like the crate that Corporal Dixon tells you to bash open to grab the Thompson out of. You have a nice pep talk from Sergeant Macaulay Culkin, and then a chat about coffee and donuts with Dixon, and off you go to capture St. Lo.
Problem is, the Germans drank all the coffee and ate all the donuts.
I just want to let everyone know, and please take my word for it, I have beaten this campaign so many times on Veteran that I basically have PTSD from the Veteran campaign at this point. You will definitely see what I mean as I go through this, so for the sake of my sanity and the fact that it would take much longer to finish this video if I had to push St. Germain's fucking hill for the millionth time, I'm doing this whole video on normal difficulty. Once Ferris Bueller gets hit with artillery,
hello darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again.
The truck crashes and you and the 29th find themselves cut off from the main attacking forces, and are hiding behind a wall overlooking a cemetery and a destroyed chapel crawling with German infantry. Before you hop over the wall, this game exemplifies how squads would get separated from each other and would have to merge into other squads like Private Guzzo over here. This first mission is supposed to be the tutorial mission, essentially, so I always just blow through this opening part where you have to meet back up with the armor, although it's still a pretty nice sequence. The AI in this game does sort of act on its own, but the German emplacements usually have AI that always want to go back to their original jobs or positions, like if they're using a machine gun or something, although they will pull out a rifle and turn on you if you get too close. The key to beating this game on Veteran was usually memorizing exactly where the Germans would be. I should also point out that damage calculation from this game pretty much was carried over to every future installment, so there's no health bar anymore in this one. The beginning here does show off this CQC mechanic that never really made it into other titles, but there is a sequence in the 4th mission which shows exactly why it was dropped. It is a cool cinematic though. You meet up with the armor pushing into the streets of St. Lo, where Sergeant McCullen orders you and Guzzo to spot targets for the Sherman sitting in the road. This is honestly a pretty boring sequence because you just sit on this tank until it blows up. Your squad, separated from the main force and surrounded again after the explosion, has a nice little chit-chat about what to do next. Guzzo tests the patience of an angry man with a machine gun, and then Huxley finds a hole in the ground so we can make our escape and outflank and place German positions. Early, I mentioned how some things had collision, and grenades can actually destroy some of the environment, which is something you rarely see in Call of Duty games now, unless it's purely scripted. You push up into a house overlooking an intersection, and then you think it's all over until...
Nice work, boys. Check your ammo levels.
German infantry supported by a Tiger tank surround your position, and you have to hold out until support arrives. Funny enough, I actually died here once because I always forget that it's not the advancing Germans that matter, it's the ones flanking around the back that always sneak up on you. This is a pretty popular mission type in the Call of Duty arsenal, just holding a position for a couple minutes until reinforcements arrive, but again, the cinematics here are just great. But hooray, the mission is accomplished, and on to St. Germain now.
Looks like your transfer request came through.
For being the second mission in this game, this one is pretty tough and exemplifies just how dug in the Germans were during the assaults on Normandy. The battle for St. Germain was one of the bloodiest battles of the war due to heavy German resistance built up in the hedgerows surrounding the Allied assault, which you can immediately see in the first few seconds of the mission. The objective here is to push up through the hedgerows and take out heavily fortified German emplacements so the armor and remaining attacking forces can push up into Saint Germain. Note that the asshole MG42 gunners just keep respawning until the tank you're pushing with moves slowly forward to the next position. To be honest, I don't like this mission very much because it involves moving awkwardly in the open pretty much the whole time, aside from taking a few farmhouses. But I will say that this is one of the few Call of Duty missions where you're just constantly pushing an objective. Although, as a kid, I didn't know you could take different routes. I will point out something cool about this level. The battle it's depicting did indeed have Fallschirmjäger troops in the area defending Saint Germain. So the FG-42 and scoped FG-42 you can find later in this level is actually a nice touch. The main reason I hate this mission is because of what I said earlier. It's this stupid hill with heavy German machine gun fire raining down on you, and all you can really do is pop smoke and push the right side and hope to God the entire German army doesn't unload on you before you get to the gun emplacements. On Veteran, pretty much as soon as you pop out your head, you're dead, and the AI can pretty much just see right through the smoke. This is only the second mission out of 14, and assaulting the bunkers later on is no easy task either. I'd be willing to argue this is one of the hardest missions in the game, but they're honestly all pretty difficult. After you move up the hill with your squad, you end up getting caught out in the open, big surprise, by some artillery, and get knocked out for a second. Dixon drags you to safety and a friendly tank comes at the last second to save you and your squad. And after that, a path is open through a couple houses to the final gun emplacements and some bunkers that I mentioned a second ago. You find the FG-42 scoped here, and you also get to see how crazy the smoke physics were back in the day, too. You really can't see anything, so I don't understand why the AI can see through it sometimes. So, I was going to talk about how difficult the bunker was. I did die here once, but it was because you can find the scoped KAR 98K, and I couldn't skip the chance for a quickscope montage. Could I? Well, that's about it for Saint Germain. I will say, I am surprised I didn't die more than once this mission, although I did run through this campaign recently a few months ago when I originally bought it, and it's sort of ingrained in my head on what happens next. So anyway, on to the next mission. This next mission puts you in the boots of a British Special Air Forces soldier named Doyle. Tasked with one mission, and one mission only. Drop into Germany, and
kill Hitler.
Nah, I'm just kidding. To be honest, I'm not really sure of the historical background this mission has, but the British do have the longest missions out of any other storyline here. The objective here is to drop paratroops behind enemy lines to meet up with the French resistance forces, but it gets a little messed up when the plane gets shot down and you have to do an emergency drop. Once you land, a Frenchman with a rifle named Pierre saves your life before you end up another victim of an MP40 hose down. And you meet up with the French resistance, Corporal Keith and Major Ingram, where they explain that the jeeps we flew in with landed far off from us and we need to go retrieve them. Important to note here that Keith and Ingram were in previous Call of Duty titles prior to Call of Duty 3, which is pretty cool. In this game, Keith has it out for his French allies at first, though, as you will notice. I actually loved this mission as a kid for some reason. Maybe it's because you sneak up on a urinating German soldier. Speaking of sneaking, this mission is technically a stealth mission, but as soon as you move up and try to be stealthy, they blow the alert whistle and start attacking. I would like to note really quick here that the Sten is actually great in this game though. The beginning segment here, you just push through these manors and courtyards until you eventually find your missing Jeep Vera. Nothing too crazy. This mission is basically just trying to show off the vehicle mechanics they just added, but I'm sure y'all don't just want to see me driving a Jeep for 5 minutes away from Germans. Once you drive to the rally point, uh-oh, boys. Is that a woman in Call of Duty? 0 out of 10, trash game, video's over. So anyway, Isabel here notifies us that there is a marquee man named Marcel that was going to take out some Flak 88s until he got trapped in the building by German infantry just ahead up here. I always go and rescue Marcel first here and then take out the Flak 88s because I like the houses approaching onto the guns better. You go through another CQC fight sequence, fight through the house until you meet up with Marcel, and then you have to storm the trenches where the Flak 88s are. I may be wrong, but there is a trench gun on this level somewhere, I think. I just didn't grab it this time. The sequence attacking the trenches is great. I honestly love trench fighting, and they also added a little interactive event when setting charges, which kind of adds to the anxiety of the campaign. You blow up the 3 Flak 88s, and then it's back to another driving sequence, which, again, I'm not going to show me driving for 5 minutes. But you end up driving over a destroyed bridge where Ingram saves you from a tank blast to the face, and that about wraps up Night Drop. Honestly, if it seems like I'm starting to rush through some of these missions, it's mostly because these moving segments are not very different from the last. So I'm just trying to mainly focus on the big moments from each mission, if you know what I mean.
Just for that save. He also got the plans for the Bosch's fuel depot.
Or he's baiting the trap.
LaRoche trusts him.
That makes one of us.
Marcel is one of our most trusted men, Corporal.
That's not saying much.
You seem to like us well enough when we save your lives. Perhaps next time we won't be as charitable.
Well, this is it. Mayenne Bridge. I'm sure, if you've at least heard of this game, you know about this mission, so I'll try to make this one quick. You're back with the Americans again on this one, and the objective is simple. Push the infantry through Mayenne so they can defuse the explosives on the other side of the river, so the Germans don't blow up the bridge before the armor moves through town. Notice how I said other side of the river. Really quick, if it wasn't for the stupid boat sequence coming up, this mission would actually be really cool because of this castle you have to run through to get to the river. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but this is seriously one of the coolest little bits to do, and I wish the mission was just assaulting a huge castle or something. But, alas, we come to the boat sequence. Yeah, I'm not talking about this. You can see how stupid this is, and don't ask me why it's in here. I don't think even Treyarch knows why. You get across the river, and the way McCullen says, "Pop smoke and take out those machine guns," is just like, bro, are you okay?
Pop smoking! Take out those machine guns!
You take out those machine guns, and you just have to move through these buildings so you can reach the area of the bridge where the explosives are planted. It's probably important to note that we have an important character death coming up, as Sergeant McCullen is just in some type of mood and doesn't feel like giving orders right now. Before you push up to the bridge, your path gets blocked by a tiger, and you have to protect Huxley while he plants explosives so you can move up. Again, I'd like to say that this sequence and the next sequence to defuse the bombs are actually quite good and just get ruined by that dumb boat part. The first part is basically a push, and then you just have to defend your allies 2 times. Once you push up into the building overlooking the bridge, Huxley gets wounded, and Dixon basically pleads with McCullen to do something to get the mission accomplished. McCullen finally speaks, and now we have to cover him while he disarms the explosives. This part's pretty easy if you take out the Germans close to the MG42s and push up to them and just use their own creations against them. Well, I guess we're done with Mayenne Bridge. On to the next one. Oh, and rest in peace, McCullen, I guess. Dude was kind of a jerk in my opinion. We stan Sergeant Dixon over here.
Tell Guzar. Tell him. Tell him to go to hell.
This next mission is another one of my favorites, and the reason why is...
There's no Canada like French Canada is the best Canada in the land.
Yep, you're the Canadians for this one. And this one's actually pretty quick, because the only objective here is to attack some industrial compound and box the Germans in even more towards Filet. Another important fact I should point out is that unlike in the multiplayer, like I said the last time, the machine guns on vehicles are actually semi-historically accurate. The 50 cal in the multiplayer shoots as fast as the MG42, if you didn't know. All you do here in the beginning is push up to clear some flak guns near the road to start. This part honestly goes by pretty quick, so if you blink, you'd probably miss it. The big meat is all at the industrial compound. You have this little cutscene with some guy named Leslie, where he tells us about said industrial compound, and all you do here at first is pop some smoke and clear out the infantry and machine guns. This whole thing is basically a circle, and it's actually pretty brutal on the harder difficulties, but you clear out the outer buildings, then quickly kill a few Germans in the center building where you regroup with your squad on what to do next. Sergeant Collard hatches the idea to block the Germans here so they can't get to the road, which then involves basically running the same route again, except you have to block 3 points. I always go to the crane first because it always has good cover. All of these are quick time events, and you can get shot while you're doing all of them, so kinda sucks. The next one I go for is the valve, which is by far the hardest one to get to, because Germans basically have 4 or 5 points from where they can shoot you from while doing this. And finally, you have to place some explosives on the side of a building. This mission can get quite difficult at this point because of how exposed you are during all of these quick time events, but if you move quickly to each objective, your allies will actually give you decent cover fire. Once you're finished there, you regroup again at the center building where, surprise, a counterattack. You start holding out for a few seconds when a few tanks decide to say hello, which is the final sequence you have to do in this mission. It literally involves running the same route for the 3rd time pretty much, so I'll just show the part where I blow up the tank. And that's it for that one. Told you this one was going to be quick. Can't make all these chapters super long or we are all going to be here for a while.
Forcing the Germans to fall back towards Falaise, while the Polish 1st Armored Division guards the Canadians' western flank.
Aye. Good luck to you too, Frenchy. Let's move out!
No matter how many times this mission comes up, I always get fooled into thinking you get to play as the Polish because of the cutscene in the beginning, but you're stuck with the Brits on this one. For this mission, before you can be the Polish and take out the Black Baron Richter tank, you have to assault this fuel plant and sabotage the tank crew's fuel supply. I've been researching the background to this for a couple of days now, and it's really fuzzy as a lot of the allied countries claim credit for this operation, but I believe this is supposed to be showcasing Operation Total Eyes, which resulted in the almost total destruction of the 2nd Company of the 101st SS Panzer Division. After you open the gates and get the explosives from Isabel, it's off to another quick driving sequence. Only this time, you get to be on the dual Vickers machine gun instead. Once the Jeep gets hit by a train, you have to plant explosives on a couple fuel depots. This first part here has a German half-track posted up right before the first depot, so I honestly just recommend not doing anything and let this little scene play out where Ingram says that LaRoche has taken out the machine gunner, because you cannot shoot the gunner out of the seat yourself for some reason. You plant the explosives at the first spot, and then you have 3 choices on how to get to the next spot. I usually choose the right side because although there's an MG42 overlooking the catwalks, they're so exposed that a few well-placed shots while moving forward will get you there quickly. You can also pop smoke and just move up with an SMG too if you're not good with the bolt action. You make it to the second spot and set the charges when another CQC fight happens, and I have to note that this is the longest CQC fight in the game. You not only push this dude off the balcony, but he pulls you down and you have to climb back up too. This takes about 2 to 3 minutes of the entire mission. As a kid, I honestly thought these little bits were so cool, and now as an adult, they're still cool, but it's like, really? Every mission needs one of these QuickTime events? I swear, out of this entire campaign, only like 2 missions don't have these somewhere. And they're Saint Germain and the Black Baron. After the charges are set, Ingram goes off and steals some German jeeps while you move through the plant to meet back up with him. Once you get there, it's another driving sequence, which is actually the coolest driving sequence in the entire game because the entire plant is just exploding around you while you're whipping out of there. This mission ends here pretty much, right after we see Major Ingram crash, but it sets us up for the next mission and the final mission for the British and French as well. After Corporal Keith vows to save Major Ingram from German captivity, and blames all of his allies in the process, of course. Well, that's it for Fuel Plant. Now, the moment I'm sure everyone's waiting for, time to be the Polish 1st Armored and take out some German tanks.
Later. Air support is arriving.
The Black Baron. Unfortunately, the shortest mission of the campaign, but arguably the most enjoyable out of all of them because who doesn't like rolling around in a Sherman tank blowing shit up? Since this mission is so short, I'll just be showing short clips of the mission because it really only has one objective with one direction, and it's to destroy other tanks in a straight line pretty much. But it must have been pretty good because it came back in World at War. I'm also going to use this brief time here to explain Michael Whitman, which I believe is the main guy we are after here. All the research I could dig up on this mission was it was this battle at this exact time where the German army would have placed Michael Whitman in charge of the 101st SS Panzer Division to defend Normandy. He was also present during the invasion of Poland, so all the dots point to the Richter tank being commanded by Michael Whitman. Even down to the final cutscene where the turrets explode off of the tank, this same battlefield account has been recorded in history as the point where Michael Whitman met his end against the Allies. But like I said in the last chapter, the British, Polish, and Canadians like to take credit for taking out the Panzer battalions stationed at Saint-Aignan. So who knows how accurate Call of Duty has it here. Well, that's about it for the Black Baron, guys. I'm sorry if this part is super short, but it's a short mission, so saves me time, I guess. And yippee! That's mission 7 out of 14, guys, so about halfway through this one.
They'll give you a promotion for this.
They'll give us all promotion for this.
The second half of the campaign starts with probably my favorite mission in the entire game, and it's the Forest. Dixon even got a promotion to Sergeant. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of this forest, so I'm just calling it Forest for this one. The reason why this mission is my favorite is because I just love the scenery and atmosphere it has. The soundtrack behind it is also very fitting and is probably one of my favorites as well. Also, who doesn't love sneaking around in some trees taking out Germans with a sniper rifle? In my opinion, this mission is actually pretty easy, although the AI can just shoot through thick bush cover sometimes, which is absolutely insane in a tight situation. The objective here is basically to blow up some storage depots and clear out remaining German infantry in the area that the French missed. Honestly, I don't know what else to tell you here other than you just push up through a forest and clear out some Germans until you start blowing stuff up. It's honestly the most straightforward mission in the entire game. The Gewehr 43 is here though, and so is the Springfield, so that's pretty cool. You push up and find one of the last remaining engineers that were sent in before your team and get him medical attention, and then it's right into clearing out trenches and setting explosives. I honestly remember this mission being longer as a kid, but I would always just use the MP40 and Gewehr 43 and die constantly, instead of relying on the Springfield and trench gun you find. You set a couple of explosives at the depot, and then you have to push through a bunker, where my teammates were the absolute bane of my existence in these tight corridors. And once you get to the other side, you then have to push over a road covered with infantry while under machine gun fire. which I recommend just popping smoke like Dixon tells you to, and move up. After a little more forest fighting, you come up to a mortar crew in a trench, and you have to clear them out where the end of the mission sequence begins, with using mortars to blow up the blockade the Germans have in front of you. The mortar in this game always frustrated me because you can't really see where your mortars are going to land, so you just end up spinning the analog sticks until you find the sweet spots. It kinda sucks. Well, I think that one went pretty quick. Now, on to Laison River, I guess.
This river days ago! Command! You know, he's too conservative! Fortune favors the bold!
Kinda hard to do with Jerry pinning our convoys down.
That ends upon our arrival, Sergeant! It ends when we get up there!
Back with the Canadians again, and Laison River is honestly very similar to the forest, and it's probably my second favorite mission next to it. This mission is actually the beginning of the end here, and is supposed to be the start of Operation Tractable, where the Allies boxed in the Germans at Falaise by capturing the small towns of Troon and Chambois. This mission has a lot of moving parts, but the objective is simple. Clear out the fortified German positions along the river so the armor can move in closer to Troon and Chambois. And you get the Lee Enfield scoped, which, if you didn't know, you can replenish its ammo by grabbing a regular Lee Enfield and then dropping it. So, this one's gonna be fun, hopefully. The first half of the mission, you pretty much just push for a pretty long time, and you start to think for a second that maybe this whole mission is just going to be a whole forest fighting thing, and it's honestly a breath of fresh air from the other missions, but again, the AI can still see right through the cover here, which kinda sucks. Eventually, after pushing up to 2 positions, and basically having 2 cutscenes on what to do next, the whole second half of the mission involves assaulting flak guns and yet another mortar sequence. You push up through artillery fire, and then you see the trenches where the 88s are and have to set charges on them. This part is similar to the third mission's trench part. After that, it's a direct push up a hill and into yet another trench covered by MGs that you have to clear out in order to bomb the motorcade below with the mortar. This mortar sequence is pretty much the same as the last mission, so nothing too special here. After blowing up the motorcade, you have to fight through the motorcade and then push up to a house that has an 88 overlooking the road. This house fight takes a few minutes, so I'll just show a few clips here and call it a day. That's about it for Laison River, I guess. Told you this mission has a lot of moving parts, but then again, this entire campaign is chock full of them, so I suppose let's get on with the last 5 missions.
Good work, Cole. Nicely done. The whole another thing or two from you. With our armor free to move, we'll soon own it.
Sicher alle! Das machen wir! Jawohl, macht ihr! Wir sollen das Dorf wieder nehmen! Macht bereit für den Gegenangriff!
You guys remember that mission in World at War where you have to run through that German asylum that became the Verrückt Zombies map? Well, allow me to present the Crossroads mission. And I'm sure you can tell by this point that the Americans obviously have the most missions here. This mission is pretty straightforward and just involves moving through buildings the entire time. This is actually another shorter mission, so to save time, I'm just going to briefly summarize this one. I'm not really sure of the background on this one, so I'm just assuming that the objective here is to capture the Crossroads at Le Bourg Saint Leonard. That's about it. The developers tried exemplifying the fact that Germany is already losing the war by this point, though, which kind of shows in the overall color and tone of the level. And yes, there is another CQC fight sequence here, which I will just flash the clip of him blowing up here really quick, which I actually think is pretty cool. I actually like this one. But, like I said, this whole mission involves moving through close quarters and then holding the crossroads against German infantry. I don't dislike this mission, but it's honestly just forgettable because of the missions surrounding it. Dixon did get wounded in this mission, but he managed to just push through the whole mission, so I didn't really feel like even mentioning it because it's kind of an excuse just to hold a building for a couple minutes. I'm doing this because next up is the longest mission in the entire game, but it's literally the most pointless as it has nothing that pertains to the Fillet Gap at all. So I'm probably just going to rush through that one too.
So what's the bad news?
Chambois is where we're going next.
I know you're probably thinking I hate this mission when it's quite the contrary, but I will be breezing through this one here because it is probably the longest mission in the entire campaign. Hostage is one of the most unique Call of Duty missions though, probably because it honestly feels like you spend more time driving from objective to objective rather than fighting at them. Something important to note here is if you pay close attention to your character Doyle, he actually wears a red beret at first and then a paratrooper helmet later on in the third-person driving game. This also isn't the first time we have seen a rescue mission that involves saving Major Ingram in Call of Duty before. Like I said way earlier, this, I believe, is Major Ingram's third or fourth appearance in the series. I guess what sets this mission apart from others in the series is that it doesn't try to be a stealth mission. And you save multiple hostages the entire mission, but I'm still pretty sure it has no real significance to the overall campaign other than serving as the final mission for the British and the French. The ending basically involves just holding out in a courtyard for a while until some light German armor pulls up into the streets and starts blasting your position. The end of the campaign here starts to honestly get kind of sad as we start losing a lot of characters that have been in the story for a while, including Isabel, who gets hit by the blast from the charges she just set. I actually liked Isabel, and it felt like she was a perfect example of how you can include women into these kinds of settings. Well, I guess that's it for the British campaign. Only 3 left to cover, and if you're still here, I commend you and your attention span.
She was a brave lass.
Oh, your job is to be the Poles radio. Dismiss, Private. You've got your orders, soldier.
Getting really close to the end here, and this one is probably one of the most intense missions, the Corridor of Death. This is also the last mission with the Canadians, and almost the end of radio operator Leslie's story too. The background to this story is the Canadians are basically a stopgap for the Polish fighting on Hill 262, and must take this town in order to support the fight that's currently going on there. The beginning of this mission is dumb, let's just be honest here. If there's anything worse than chilling in a Higgins boat waiting to be sprayed by an MG-42, it's being trapped in a half-track surrounded by infantry. And they won't let you jump out of the half-track until some of the infantry is taken out. Luckily, this mission only has a 10-second fight sequence, and mostly just involves pushing up to a building and then holding it for the entire mission, which is basically the entirety of the last 3 missions here. First, you hold the first floor for a second, which includes taking out some mortar crews. I recommend just staying here until the smoke starts popping off, which then I recommend going upstairs because the Germans just flood into the first floor, and it's near impossible to fight them all off at the same time, because they come from 4 directions in the house fairly quickly. The final part is much easier as you just turn back to the same street you just pushed through, and you have 2 MG-42s you can use to just breeze through this part. Ah, yes, and before the end scene, who can forget the infamous crowbar QuickTime event? This cellar part I always remember being longer, but you just take out a couple Germans, set the explosives, and then that's it. Sadly, we lose Sergeant Collard here, in a similar fashion to how we lost Isabel. But the valiant efforts of the Canadians have opened up the way to support the Polish, So now, on to the Mace, and the final mission for the 1st Armored.
Oh, we thought we lost you for a moment there, like, we lost Kalaho. I'm putting it in for the Victoria Cross, you know? And you for a promotion, Corporal. Alright, someone get on the radio to command. They can start moving armor through Ceylan Bay. Let's get some reinforcements to the Polish, eh?
Taking the mace is one thing. Now we have to hold it.
The Mace, Mount Ormil, Hill 262, or whatever you want to call it. This final mission for the Polish is one of the most brutal campaign missions in my opinion, and easily one of the longest right next to Hostage. The background and objective here is to hold Hill 262 until the Canadian forces I mentioned a second ago can push up and reinforce the troops that are barely holding on as the Germans are throwing everything at this hill here. There are so many moving parts in this one and involves multiple character deaths, which includes the death of Private Leslie Barron and Kowalski. You also find the MG34 and FG42 scope, which help a lot in their respective sequences. The mission starts off with you already being in a dire situation, where you have to man the immobile Firefly's gun to take out some of the pushing German armor. You take a blast to the face, which then puts the tank completely out of commission, and then forces you to retreat and into a long moving sequence where you can find the FG42. After pushing back for a while, you meet up with Leslie and have to then hold out another position for a minute while spotting artillery targets for Leslie. This sequence is just about the same as using the mortars earlier. After pushing even more back up the hill, we come to another stopping point where Private Leslie meets his unfortunate end. The character deaths here have no fancy cutscenes, and you just have to keep moving while watching a lot of men fall. This is one of the reasons why I believe Call of Duty 3's campaign was one of the darkest they made. You end up having to fall all the way back to what looks like a Polish field station, which is just a dark sight for a game that's rated T for teen. The coffins and wounded men you see just makes you question how this even got the T rating in the first place. But anyway, unfortunately, the tanks approaching you aren't Canadians, which means another holdout sequence. This whole part is quite long and involves spotting targets for artillery, then moving to grab a Panzerschreck to destroy the tank in front of you, and then holding off infantry for a while until you spot green flares. The MG34 is here though, which makes the job a little easier, and the ending here fills you with a bit of pride. It feels like you just defeated the entire German army.
That's it! They're running! We did it! We did it!
I'm sorry we got here a little late.
But this is it. We are finally at the last one. So let's rip right into this and tear up Chambois and box the Germans in for good.
Commander Jakowitz, are you all right?
I'll be home soon. They will surrender soon.
The Bosch? That's not likely, not while they still have a way out.
That being
Chambois.
To break down the final and most difficult mission, what else can I say but be prepared to die here, a lot. No matter what difficulty this mission is on, you are constantly fighting back German infantry, armor, and whatever else. For the background to this mission, well, it's the Battle of Chambois, so I think that's a pretty good explanation, if there ever was one. You started with the Americans, you end it with the Americans. And honestly, as difficult as this mission is, it's pretty goddamn epic. You start with holding out one position, which takes what feels like an eternity, moving between 30 cals and using whatever else to hold back the Germans. And then, after a tank starts pushing you, you have to keep falling back until you eventually escape into another area where you have to reinforce another squad under assault from armor and infantry, where Guzzo's radio gets taken out. With no other option, Guzzo pushes up to place flares to mark positions for artillery, where he gets injured and you have to push up with Dixon to save him. After saving Guzzo, things just go from bad to worse, as this is where Dixon meets his end. This part has always sat with me ever since I was a kid, and it just makes you want to beat this mission even more, I swear. After the loss of Dixon, Guzzo takes charge, and this is where things get difficult. This whole end sequence and even push to the last area just has non-stop spawning enemies, and you're desperate to get these checkpoints. I died here quite a few times, it's no joke. This ending sequence is just so epic though, and it still sits in my brain. So I'm just going to let it play here while I do the outro. In closing here, since this mission was so difficult and so long, I just want to say thank you so much if you watch this entire thing. I really don't want to waste time on an outro since this has been so long. So in short, this game has more passion in its left toe than any of the newer Call of Duties, and it definitely shows. I still love this game, and the campaign, no matter how brutally difficult it is. And it's honestly pretty sentimental to me, especially the part where Dixon dies. In my opinion, this is the most underrated Call of Duty campaigns in its very long line of games, and I just wish it was remembered more fondly, despite all of its flaws. So, again here, I just want to say, thank you all for watching. If you enjoy long things like this, please like and subscribe, as it takes a lot of effort to make this stuff with only an Xbox and a cell phone. Also, thank you Elmo Sanchez for the shout out and the inspiration for this video. I'll see you all in the next one, and I really hope you enjoyed Call of Duty 3. See you guys.
Canadian and American reinforcements arrive to help seal the Falaise Gap and close off any route of escape for the retreating German soldiers. 4 days later, Allied forces liberate Paris, bringing an end to the Battle of Normandy.